hope you took some time to reflect and find your way into that story, to consider what it might have been like to be there, using your imagination to prayerfully wonder if you had have stood there in the crowd, or if you had have been leading that deaf and mute man to Jesus, if you had have been right there next to Jesus when he looked up to the heavens, what might it have been like? What would you have noticed? What could you have thought? How might you have been feeling? I wonder if you thought much about what life was like for that man who was brought to Jesus. Before meeting Jesus, for him, the world was a fairly isolating kind of place. Without a capacity to hear, there was not much chance for him to get connected with others, to communicate. He could barely speak, so no chance of being understood. He must have felt very alone and very helpless to do anything about it. We get a sense of that because others lead him to Jesus. And in fact, he does almost nothing in the story. This deaf man is brought to Jesus, and Jesus takes actions around him and for him. And then the focus shifts back to the crowd right away. We actually don't find out much more about this man and what happens to him now that he can speak, now that he can hear. Though we might have imagined some of those things based on other times in which Jesus and his apostles heal those who are isolated and alone and unable to connect and communicate and relate. If you'd done some imagining like that, maybe you felt some of the things that this man may have felt. Perhaps you felt some of the hopefulness and expectation that the crowds felt. We know that this particular part of the ancient world was a real melting pot of cultures that didn't really get on at all. And Jesus arrives into this culture, into this time, into this situation, and takes time for one man. Did you notice the way that Jesus took him apart from the crowd so he was by himself with Jesus? It's not really clear, is it, from Mark's account how Jesus managed to keep the crowd back. Often in this kind of scenario, they move with him, they chase him, they follow him, they're hard on his heels. But his authority is unmistakable, so when he guides the man to be away, the crowd stays back. And then Jesus does something that only seems familiar because we've read about Jesus doing it. Jesus puts his own fingers into the man's ears. Then Jesus spits, presumably onto his fingers again, and puts those fingers on the man's tongue. Jesus is very interested in the way in which his own bodily form, here he is, God in flesh, engaging with the creatures he's made. The one who designed the inner workings of the ear now puts his finger into one man's ears. He who caused the tongue to be made now puts his finger on one man's tongue. Jesus is interacting, the Creator in his creation. He's unstopping the ears, causing them to be open and able to hear. He's loosening the tongue. You know when we say people are tongue-tied because they can't get their words out? Well, Jesus is loosening this man's tongue so that he can speak, so that he can communicate, so he can engage, so he can be connected. His life will be transformed. Jesus is doing a remarkable thing. And it's really important in our lives at the moment that we see the power that Jesus has. He has this power to bring about healing so that one who is disconnected and isolated might become reconnected. He might become whole. He might be a sign of the kingdom that is to come, when all can hear and speak the wonders of God's amazing creation. That's what Jesus is doing here. He's reminding us that he has power over even this. And if we just bring our troubles, our concerns to him, he can deal with them. He offers to do that for us. He definitely has the power to do that for us. What if you take a moment now to think about some of those things that you most want Jesus to take care of? The things that most trouble you, that stop you from feeling connected and involved, that you really want Jesus to deal with. Why don't you take those to Jesus now? Take some moment now in prayer and bring to Jesus the things that you want him to deal with, knowing that he has the power and is able to do it. He's prepared to deal with each individual, including you. So have confidence when you pray and take your concerns to your Lord and to your Saviour.